Well, thank you all. Thank you, both panelists, for joining us tonight. As you could see, this is very much probably the talk of the town right now in Howard County in terms of big issues, and I would say rightfully so. And so, I don't want to introduce the panelists any more than I already have. I want to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves, their background and what sort of their connection to this issue of, an Office of Inspector General is. And so we start with David.
Are you sure, Mrs. Bobo?
Okay, all right. We'll start with the former county executive and current still legend, Liz Bobo, former county executive Liz Bobo. You want to introduce yourself and why you'd like to see an Office of Inspector General.
So I'm Liz Bobo, former county executive, former member of the Howard County Council. Told me I'm not loud enough. And also former member of the House of Delegates. I can't get much louder than that. How soft spoken I am.
That's good. We got it. We're recording it, so you're good. You're good.
Okay. And well, I don't know what to do about it, honey. That's about as loud as I can get.
If you could maybe, if you want to move up a little bit,
here's the front seat,
that
right
might
here.
make it easier. But yeah, no, sorry about that. But yes, you were a former county executive, former state delegate, former council member. You've done it all.
A human being, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'm not really sure. I'm not sure just where you want this to go, so I'm not going to speak very long right now. But clearly, keeping track of what's going on in government at any level is extremely important.
Yes.
And it's not easy. And we've seen some very difficult examples right here in our country, which is supposedly, and I believe, the greatest democracy the world's ever seen. And it's important to keep a really close watch on what government's doing. And there are people who try to get around it, particularly when there's a big profit to be made and there's doing, and I don't in any way want to demonize or down talk developers, but development is a huge business in Howard County and Columbia. And there's a lot of money to be made here. And there's a lot of money that was made here. Interestingly enough, and this is something, it's not on your topic, but it's something that I wish was taught in the schools, and I'm going to be talking with some people about it. The way Jim Rouse went about building his new town of Columbia was very unique in the entire country to this day. The people who had any involvement in government were unable to serve on any boards. People, whether it was your mother or your father or your sister or your brother. And he was really very, very strict in how those kinds of things were enforced. Right in there with him, hook and jaw, was Senator Jim Clark, who died a few years ago, who was the head of the Maryland Senate for a while. And the two of them, the Clarks and the county government became, really very close. And there was very little attempt to do something, what's the word I want to use? If not only not illegal, but unjust and self-serving, particularly to stuff your own pockets. But it was very difficult to do that here. And the government didn't do it. Jim Rouse did it. And like nothing that's ever been in this country before or since, and working with Senator Clark. So I don't really know. I've got to hear a little bit more about I haven't seen Liz's bill, but I do think it's a good idea. I definitely think it's a good idea. And I think people will pay close attention to it. Yeah. And I prefer to hear what else happens, and then I'll make my comments accordingly.
Yes. Well, thank you.
And I do want to say, I still think, Jim Rouse has been gone for a long time. Senator Clark has been gone for a long time. But I do think that our county, to this day, is above the standards that are in many other counties, even in the state of Maryland. But that's not enough.
That's not saying much if you're comparing to Baltimore County.
I know what you're saying, or Prince George's County.
Yeah,
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. So anyway, that's my opening, and I have my ears wide open
Yes.
to see where you want us to go with this.
Yes. Well, yeah, no, thank you, Liz, again for participating. And yeah, definitely, I think Howard County and Columbia in 2024 is not the same as in 1972, or and so yeah, we've had some change, and not all for the best. But yes, we'll go to our other.
I'm a David Kleinmeyer. I retired as the Anne Arundel County attorney 10 years ago, many years in the Office of Law, previous to that, a prosecutor, and done various things. And in the last 10 years, I've been writing on issues mostly of openness, transparency, and accountability in government. I used to write quite a bit in the Baltimore Sun. The Sun has changed a bit over the past 6 months in their editorial policies. So a little less of that, occasionally in the Washington Post. And Jake referred to the Baltimore Brew, which I have to say has done a very good job and really is one of the few, and I think this ties in with what Liz said, it's one of the very few, and there's two reporters doing investigative journalism. And that's where I think I would like to start. Some of us, Liz will remember I worked in Annapolis. In Annapolis, when you're in county government, you can't go 2 feet without tripping, used to. 40 years ago, you couldn't go 10 feet without tripping over a reporter. They knew everyone, they talked to everyone. Not all of them were all that smart, but people talked to them like any other. People talked to them and they found out things. That has changed so dramatically. If there's one thing I wouldn't advise my kids or grandchildren to do, would be to go into journalism. It's a wonderful profession. It's absolutely dying. So why is that relevant to this bill? As local journalism has gone away, accountability has gone away. I worked for 7 county executives, more or less, some good, some not quite as good. Public officials really are like most other human beings. They will do things they shouldn't do if they think no one is watching. It used to be that the press was watching, and hate them, yellow journalism, whatever, they were watching, and it was a form of accountability. I may not have appreciated as much when I was working in government as I do now, but now I see, and I live in Baltimore County and work a lot with people active in Baltimore County affairs. Now I see the consequences of years of neglect, of transparency, accountability, and insight to what's going on. I used to joke, when I talk in Baltimore County quite a bit, I always have to start, because I'm from Anne Arundel County, I was county attorney there, and I always say, okay, Anne Arundel County was not perfect, but Baltimore County, true to its history, beginning with Spiro Agnew, really perfected really by Dale Anderson, still has a tremendous level of what political science call soft corruption. Soft corruption is that which is not illegal, which is just plain law. I see it in Baltimore County. I used to say, and those of you in Howard County can tell me, it's somewhere in between. In Anne Arundel County, developers and builders have a tremendous amount of influence. No doubt they do. In Baltimore County, what happens is they have critical mass. They basically run the shop. I may be overstating it a little bit, but just a little. The Inspector General movement, I don't want to turn this into some sort of history, but the Inspector General movement was really a response to that. And I think at this point, local governments, given that local newspapers aren't coming back, there's no sustainable business model. The Baltimore Banner, God bless them, they do not do what I call critical reporting of local government. I've urged them to. I've talked to their editors. They aren't doing it yet. The Baltimore Sun, I've written 60 op-eds published by the Baltimore Sun. It's sad what's happened to them. There's one reporter covering Baltimore County, 800,000 plus people. They used to have a bureau of 7 in Towson alone for Baltimore County. All I'm saying is, in my opinion, an IG now is a necessity. It's no longer a luxury, and that's why you're seeing these movements develop. I want to say some good news for you. I read a lot. I was a fair legislative draftsman. I had some really excellent ones working for me, with me. I see a lot of slop that comes out. Liz Walsh's bill is a good bill. Now I know that she had probably the help of model ordinance, because there are those things for local governments and IGs. But it really hits on every note, including some things that I've suggested that are important that you don't always see, which is the duty of an employee to cooperate. In other words, if you come to see an administrative assistant in the department, with the IG, you don't want that person to be able to say, I don't want to talk. You want it to be a duty of employment for that person to talk. Because what happens if it's a duty of employment? They don't talk, they can be fired. So it's a really good bill. I'm not going to say it's perfect. I've never seen one of this. But it's a really good bill. So that's the good news. You have a really good head start. I saw the bad news where I got involved, and it was initially with pieces in the Baltimore Sun when they went after Isabel Ramos, who is the inspector general in the city. That was led by the mayor and his city solicitor. So they were attacking. I know what you said, Jake, about a rogue inspector general. That almost makes me laugh. I've seen rogue administrative hearing officers, rogue county administrative officers, rogue planning officers. They can do some damage. It's a little bit laughable to hear government officials worry about a rogue inspector general or a rogue county auditor. That's just talk. And, they're like the rest of us. Really, having someone look over your shoulder, let's face it, is not something you automatically ask for, especially if you're not used to it. So in Baltimore City, the mayor went after Ramos to try to, that's how I sort of got involved in this. We came to her defense. And then in Baltimore County, the county council, led by its chairman, they went after her, basically to take away all of her powers. It was gross. You are not there. And that's a tremendous, I don't know what the support is politically for it, Jake. But I have to say, obviously I'm familiar, it is in Baltimore County. People here are more engaged, and I think there's very good news. I would urge you to support this bill, not in every aspect of it, there's things. One thing I'll say, and then I know you want to open it up. I do think in terms of expense, we used to say, Liz, in Anne Arundel County, when people would talk about spending money, we'd say, this ain't Montgomery County. The board, the advisory board, has a lot of bells and whistles. This is just me talking. I don't think you need all that. If push came to shove and that was an issue, as long as the advisory board doesn't have the power to meddle in what the IG, the decisions she or he makes, and has some authority, you don't need a big fancy advisory board. I would hold out the one to the state prosecutor as an oversight board. It's streamlined. They meet periodically to hear reports and make recommendations. But other than that, that's their role. So if they're looking to save money at some point, I think you could cut that back. Other than that, hats off to Ms. Walsh and and those of you who support it, hopefully will, but it's a good and necessary, even if you're not as bad off as Baltimore County. And I say that with a fair amount of knowledge of what goes on. You know? And listen, the other thing I'd say, I'm a lawyer. I never represent, I don't demonize, I don't demonize developers or builders. They are who they are. They do what they do. And I know you feel this the same way. It's the politicians and appointed officials who have to be strong enough and resist. Developers and the, you know, capitalists are like special interests. They're out to earn money. They're not, that doesn't make them bad, but they're always going to do what they do. And the currency of the trade, of course, is political donations. Last bit of advice. Don't count on an IG to fix all the problems with builder and developer influence, if that's a problem in Howard County. It may help. The IG in Baltimore County caught County Executive Olszewski. He'll deny it was him. Nonsense. Doing a special favor for David Cordish. You all know who he is. In bypassing some procedural things like a hearing when Mr. Cordish wanted to build a tennis pavilion in the back of his big glorious house in northern Baltimore County. There was others, a former person I know quite well, I won't mention his name, is a former county attorney, and then director of permits, approvals and inspections, waived fees. He had no authority to waive for Howard Brown, a big Owings Mill developer. I think he's done some things here. The Inspector General will catch some of that stuff if people talk, which they will, but not all of it. You know, there's always going to be a bit that depends on the integrity of the people you elect and watching the donation streams. So that's just a real, you know, realism sort of thing. But I would say I don't see an Inspector General anymore as optional because no one else is watching.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And well, thank you, David. Definitely bring, you know, a wealth of knowledge and experience to the conversation, and so super helpful to have that. And you know, you touch on the advisory board. It sounds like, I guess that is true that not all IGs do have an advisory board, and so I think that's why the devil really is in the details with those. And you know, you asked about you know, what is the reception to the bill there, and
Yeah.
you know, one, it's kind of hard to gauge that because we haven't had the public hearing process yet. There hasn't been a vote and all that, but you know, it's been getting more and more media attention now. It's good that the IGs in Baltimore County and Baltimore City have been, you know, very cooperative, I think, and happy to see that Liz is doing this and probably giving some advice maybe. And so that's been helpful. But and what I've seen in the news is that I think, you know, Liz has said in the news that she hasn't heard of any issues in the county executive's office. And so that's why I say, you know, the devil's in the detail of how exactly is that advisory board, you know, crafted. And you know, I just added some more details to the slide, and basically again, it's appointed by the county executive but confirmed by county council members. And the way that the advisory board is structured is that there has to be at least 5 members who are citizens of Howard County, and each, you know, 1 member for each council district essentially. And then beyond that, you can have 4 additional quote unquote professional members, which means you're, you know, a former IG or auditor yourself, member, you know, of a IG association, a law school dean, retired judge, something along those lines. And so I bring that up to say, you know, how the county executive may react may depend on how much of a say that he has over, you know, who is appointed to the advisory board. And so, you know, this does give him appointing authority with council confirmation. And so perhaps that will, you know, make the county executive a little bit more likely to embrace it than otherwise, but I'm not really sure. But, you know, one question I have for you, David, is if you could speak on, you know, why you know, to show an example of why an office like this would be, you know, very good in Howard County, like if you could speak on some of the work that the IGs have done in Baltimore County and Baltimore City, and then get into a little bit of detail of like how that, what that, the retaliation that caused from the political establishment against them in those jurisdictions.
Yeah, I try to make the, listen, Jake, if people have questions, I don't want to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
They don't have to hold them to the end. I mean, obviously I can talk and talk. That's burned in them, you know?
Yes.
But,
Okay.
yeah, that's a good question. I did read.
Like, what was the question? I heard the college and the school system. What?
The college and the school system, they would have control over that.
Yeah, would the Office of Inspector General be able to investigate if there was some unethical things happening there in the libraries? Yeah. So for the people in the Zoom, we asked the panelists, somebody in the Zoom asked if the IG would have, you know, oversight authority over institutions like the community college, the county library system. And, you know, that's a relevant question with the library system because, you know, David, you're laughing at the idea that anybody could successfully characterize an auditor or an inspector general as going rogue. And yet that is exactly what happened earlier. I think that was this year, right? Or no, that was last year.
Yeah. And there's ways to deal with it. I mean, the auditor is appointing, you know, I'm not going to characterize whether the auditor here did. I'm familiar with it because I was involved. People ask me questions, but there are ways of dealing with, you know, bad performance for any public official. I can.
Tell us what
Yeah, that.
instance you're referring to was.
Go ahead.
I mean, I won't go into detail, but it was very high profile at the time, and it was right before the sketchy Lakefront Library thing happened. But basically, you know, and it's I won't necessarily give my take on it, but I'll just say, you know, what the narrative was that the head of our library system, the auditor got an anonymous complaint sent to them that the head of our library system was a part of like a sorority and she was using her control.
Made a racially insensitive remark.
Or the auditor.
The auditor allegedly made a racially inappropriate remark.
In his investigation of the library system person allegedly abusing her power to allow her sorority to use like the facility for free, like not in accordance with and so that was reported anonymously to the auditor, and then he put out a report, and then the complaint was that the report had some racially motivated language because the head of the library is a Black woman.
I just wanted to add though that what was done was the library system, this should never happen in a public library system. It was early on did that.
Did what?
They closed the library and.
Oh, yeah. Got it.
They can have their own private thing, regardless of anything that is said, that should, the public library should be open to the public at all times.
You're right. There obviously were probably, I'll assume there were two sides to the argument, and I didn't, and there were.
And
There are ways of sorting that. Bringing that back to this discussion, you know, the auditor is responsible for people. That can be handled, hopefully well, within the current structure of government. The same with an inspector general, the same with the county attorney, the same with the hearing officer. I'm not saying it's always done well, but there are structures to deal with that kind of thing. It just strikes me as odd that they, you know, or that for the inspector general, there's this enormous, elaborate structure built up. That's my only point there. I mean, I'm not saying the auditor shouldn't be accountable for an inspector general, but there are ways to do that without having such a large board in operation. I've seen it. Absolutely.
Oh,
He had a question first.
okay, cool. All right, Jay.
I have a question. What's your experience with whistleblowers?
That's
Are
a
they
good.
protected in the Rundle of Baltimore?
Yeah.
Or should there be a bill?
Well, not necessarily in this bill, although I didn't see it. And again, I only had time to go through it once, and I did look for the scope, but I didn't I didn't immediately find it, whether it includes, it would not include the Plumbing Association. I assure you that, unless there are specific contracts, because that's private. It's just not going to extend it. It can be extended to the Board of Education by agreement, but that's a complicated thing because the Board of Education is not part of county government. This IG is part of county government. The Board of Education is not.
And how about-
Board of Education? Absolutely not. It's an independent agency of the state of Maryland.
Meaning they don't report to the county executive, is that
Yeah, exactly what I'm saying.
still a government?
They're not subject to the control of the county executive or the control of the county council.
And I should add that CB 48 does touch on whistleblower protections.
That's-
Yes,
yeah.
CB 48, the companion bill, it does
Yeah.
touch on.
It doesn't have to be in there, but all whistleblowers should be protected now, and many counties do have the protection.
So that's helpful.
But it's absolutely necessary. There's two sides to the coin. If you're going to require them to cooperate, you have, which is good, you certainly, even if you don't require them to cooperate, you must protect them from complaining, because there will be retaliation if you don't.
Yes.
It's as good as their IT security and their personal, it's as good as their system, and that's their human system, and they keep their mouth shut. And their IT, is as, little people gain access to it. So it's only as good as that. It's better than nothing. But sure, if I was a whistleblower, would I feel safe? I don't know. But I feel pretty good.
Yep. Yeah, Kat?
Yeah.
We got you.
so But I do have this, I always think it's possible what we're doing. I do.
And I did lean favorably toward what? That's
See,
about.
To the bill.
Got it.
My concern or my proposed amendment is that the board itself would be from, one member from two nominees submitted by the county council for each jurisdiction. And that the board, the chair of the Board of Ethics chooses from those two choices. So that way, who is appointed by the county executive. So that way there's a disbursement of power, because there may be a time that this IG and the board may be expecting the county executive or the county council or one county council member. So we want to make sure that the power is dispersed throughout. So that's where I would be.
Yeah.
And then I do agree, I think it's a bit heavy on the advisory board. And another thing that they say, we had also members of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, from the University of Maryland, there are experts that can be put on this board to have it all from the county executive. I think it's too pushed in one direction.
The only thing I would say, I don't disagree with anything you said or necessarily. That wouldn't rise or fall the bill for me. I understand it might be for other people. But I think you are right. Make sure that however it's structured, however you do it, that particularly if the IG is looking for multiple terms, that he or she isn't scared to go after the people at the top. There's one person at the top, that executive. And you really want to make sure, and that might be in the structure of how that person is appointed. To be honest, removal is a different thing, because just like I'm going to tell you something, county executive Ball is not going to post this idea publicly, period, end of story. That would be politically crazy. It's also politically crazy for a county executive to try to go after an IG to get him or her fired if that IG has just found the county executive did something wrong. So there are certain rules of politics, and don't do things that, cut off and this is spite face is one of them. But if they're looking for reappointment, and that depends on the county executive having a really heavy control on it, that worries me just a wee bit. And I won't be any more specific than that. It worries me a wee bit.
Then two more parts is.
For a reason is what I'm saying, it worries.
Yeah, see, that's what I
Yeah.
immediately stuck out.
Mhm.
The other part is how is it indicated, it looks like that's, on the website. But then sometimes when you post report on the website, how effectively is that given to the public? And so that would be a concern on how is that information or that report disseminated out?
The Boulder County IG does an email blast, and I guess anyone can sign up.
Yes, but I mean, the actual report itself, how it's presented, sometimes it's, you're feeding it to a public that may not know how it's being.
There's a public, because of the confidentiality, there's a public summary that's going to be released. The full investigative report is not.
Now, my final question is, how does follow-up work? What happens after?
That's a great question because that is entirely dependent on what the IG finds. The IG has no enforcement power. In other words, if they find a crime, they refer it to the state's attorney, possibly the state prosecutor, depending on what the crime is. If it's a disciplinary violation, which many times they are, it goes to the appointing authority, whoever that is for the person. So basically, the inspector general is a fact finder. Looks at the facts, applies the law to the facts, and makes the conclusions as to whether there was fraud, waste, abuse. What happens next is up to whatever he or she finds and what's violated and who is the responsibility to enforce it. Sometimes nothing. And that's the problem. Nothing's going to be, there's no perfect solution. I mean, because personnel actions, and this to me has always been, I fought it. Now that I'm on the outside, say the IG finds somebody, misused their authority, and should at least get a couple weeks off. You'll never know about that because the discipline of county employees is protected under the Maryland Public Information. So there can be a wee bit of frustration in the system. And that's why I said the IG is just part of what I call an entire system of accountability and transparency. And there's other parts of the system that have to work well. The PIA, which I deal with a lot, does not work well. It's been improved since there's an ombudsman. But let me tell you another little secret, as well as she can jump all over me when I say this. There's a misconception that because Maryland is a blue state, that it therefore would have good government laws. Really, the opposite is true. Because political science will tell you that states, doesn't matter which party, with a history of one party control of the legislature, have the worst good government laws. Now, I'm not saying that just because of the corruption in America, but that's just basically accepted as true. That whatever party's in power and controls those laws isn't necessarily that anxious to have people find out what they do. So Maryland's Public Information Act is not very strong. You saw the battles. I'm sure this group, was probably when it involved the police. For years and years, the police would do whatever they did, and there was absolutely no way you knew what was happening to them. Now that all got changed, but it was a big hoopla.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't miss that if you read the local newspapers. But other employees, it's still very much a secret. So that's just sort of one of the takeaways. Look at all of this in context. The IG is a great start. Sorry, I don't want to fix it.
We'll go. Yeah, Bill.
Thank you.
A little louder.
All here for the purpose of trying to encourage good, effective discussion. But I think people understand that corruption basically is not just some surreptitious crime that doesn't really impact anybody. It takes money out of our budget to feed people and to provide social services, to provide jobs. So this corruption is cancer on our entire. And I've talked to people in local government who think that the problem in Howard County is amongst the worst in all America. So I might disagree with Terry.
Yeah, I'm with Bill on
That could be,
that.
that could be because.
Yes, that's a big.
Where he started the presentation.
Yeah.
He said, the problem is nobody really knows what's going on. Well, we've negotiated $70 billion for the fees for 6 months associated with 11 minutes made. There is just this rampant wholesale ability going on, in my opinion. I think the answer to that is to get the word out. You suggested people going into journalism earlier.
No, I didn't. Well, only if they're independently wealthy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I do it for free, but I'm retired, you know.
Well, and you know what? It's kind of like the Columbia Association Board of Directors.
Yeah.
Most of those people are volunteers.
Yeah, they are.
And they care about the local government. And we need to find a way, Jake, you're the king of the grassroots,
Thank
whatever it takes, knocking on doors, getting emails, sending out blasts. I think that, and I'll do my part to support you in that. And I would like to ask Liz, you're uniquely situated, having been in that position of chief executive. My concern is actually displayed right here. I'm concerned that with the entire executive branch appointing the advisory board and them appointing the inspector general, that there's going to be a tendency to rubber stamp whatever the entire branch of government does. Do you have any suggestions on how that might be addressed?
Just by keeping a closer watch and talking to the executive more frequently and telling it just doesn't cut it. With me, this is an interesting topic for me because I don't get the point of what the heck are we doing building a new library anyway? We have a beautiful, good library sitting there. What does that say about us when we want to all spend all that money so that Howard Hughes can have better access to properties? I mean, I don't, so I'm not a good person. You know, that's what I think. We shouldn't be doing it at all.
Can I answer?
Yeah.
I mean, there are needs in the county. And there are probably fewer people in Howard County than any other county in Maryland, and possibly most of the counties in the country.
Oh, yeah.
But we have poverty here. We have homeless people here. We have kids going without meals here. What are we doing tearing down a perfectly good library? And we know what it is, apparently, not apparently, obviously, Howard Hughes thinks they can have an increased profit if they can approach it in that way. You know, I mean, I don't wish Howard Hughes poorly. I'm sure their profit is very good right now. I'm against the whole darn thing.
Or did you want to say something?
I can put a price tag right on what you said. I don't know your name. I'm sorry.
Bill.
Bill, there's a big issue in Baltimore County now, and Howard County and Anne Arundel County many years ago implemented impact fees ahead of their time. And it was a bit of a struggle because, you know, Baltimore County did not. They in 2019, they faked it. They implemented an impact fee bill and it had so many loopholes, it didn't collect any money. Impact fees, as you know, are money raised from new construction, you know, paid for by the builder, basically, to pay for new infrastructure, schools in particular. So now Baltimore County is overcrowded, way behind. They left on the table. I asked a friend, budget officer in Anne Arundel County, send me the sheet. 20 years they collected $250 million, Anne Arundel County, in impact fees for public construction of public schools to expand facilities, to accommodate growth. Baltimore County, none. That and all of that, I will tell you without doubt, was because of builders and developers whispering in the ears of members of the Baltimore County Council that you can't do that. You can't impose those fees because if you do, well, they didn't really say we won't make as much money. You know, they claimed construction would stop, housing would stop, and it kept going and going and going. Now's a different time. But all of that was $250 million lost because of political, improper, I would call it, political influence. The inspector general won't get at that stuff. You know, that really is, you have to be there, you have to watch, and there's no substitute for that. But there's a price, and it's exactly the soft corruption. So I just don't want to say this isn't going to solve all problems, but it will take a look at those contracts you're talking about. And the Inspector General often finds errors and shortcuts that were taken in there that shouldn't have been. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, thank you, David. Remember, 1 minute or less. Thank you, Joel. Thank you. Yes.
I'm not sure where you see the advisory panel not heavy. It's a lot of discussion about how it's organized. It doesn't say very much about when it's done. And Jay made the comment oversight. I wonder if it should be called the oversight board, because its main function is to hire the IG to help insulate it from the auditor problem about firing, which looking at Baltimore County, it's hired by the council firm or executive firm by the council. So you're trying to get away from that problem that we have with the auditor. The problem is with the expansion of the dedicated people, you could then have the executive go find those people to change the majority to get to their vote if that's it. What I think is missing from a lot of it is that the people on the ethics board commission and the IG should not be able to serve on any other board or commission, but the number of people that serving on multiple ones currently. You got to insulate them from that. I find I'm not clear how it functions in the charter with the executive and whether it is a department or not. And there's no discussion about what is the base salary, what's the schedule of the employees. That seems to be missing. And the IG seems to have inherited all the functions of the ethics commission, which is a large job of the financial disclosures of all the people who are required and the lobbying report. So that's not entirely clear how that's going to function. And also, for the record, Jason helped me, other people with testimony. There's 1985 resolution that governs the authority of the auditor.
Well, thank you, Joel. I don't know if there's any response. You don't have to. Yes. Yeah, Ying and Andy. We'll do Ying, Angie, and then was there maybe one last question? Then Kat. Okay, cool. And then we'll wrap up. But yes.
Mine was sort of a comment to what David say that it would be political suicide for the county executive to fire someone who just investigated them. I agree. In a normal world, yes.
This is Howard County.
Yeah.
But Jay recounted what happened to the auditor. To me, that sums up what happens in Howard County, and it also feedback on what people mentioned about we need to let people know what happened. It's a work chart of corruption that people don't realize because the county executive doesn't have to fire the IG himself. He can use the political allies on the county council or use other tools at his disposal. He's very powerful.
Missing the bill, the IG. Report is reporting and firing.
Right.
So
it's not a fail-proof. And
No.
you mentioned that, right? It's a good step, but I think the
There's a little hyperbole in what I said.
Yeah.
If in fact, most position like that, he has to get 2/3 of the council. You know, if it would be set up in that manner, then maybe he could do that. But there's no, at some point, you know, you have to hope that you have at least one county executive and 2/3 of the members of county council with integrity. Because if you don't, you're sort of screwed anyway. You know, I'm not dismissing what you're saying.
The citizens' education has to go beyond just the basics.
Sure.
What everybody does, what his roles are. We really have to look at the history, the actions of all our elected leaders, what they have done, and figure out, you know, what there's no better way for me to call it other than the org chart of power and corruption, even if it's self-corruption. But whose job is that? We all have busy lives.
That's the killer, isn't it? Yeah, my wife deals in volunteer organizations and not just in community and civic organizations, but there's a dearth of volunteers. It's very hard to get people in any capacity, they're busy with their families, with their jobs. But it's hard. And that's another reason it's community activism is trailing off in some areas, not everywhere. But I don't know that's why I say sometimes the IG might be the only thing left, but that's very true in Baltimore County. It's true in a lot of Anne Arundel County too. The level of community activism has gone down the same that every other sort of volunteer extra thing has gone down. But I don't know that there is a perfect replacement.
But it's community activism, and to add on to that, it's also like, you're a humble guy, so you downplay this a little bit, but when I say that, like, you're right, that probably sometime down the road some scheme is going to be done to try to disarm the OIG if they go after the wrong person, and maybe it's political suicide, just like somebody might have said it was political suicide for Johnny O to propose that bill.
Yeah.
Now Johnny O is going to Congress, and so, but the reason why that attempt to disarm failed, maybe there's not as strong of an activism base, but it's also because of this man right here's pieces in the Baltimore Brew exposing, here's what they're trying, debunking the narrative. And so it's, whether it's the media or whether it's the community, somebody's got to be out there aggressively debunking the BS narrative if and when that comes, which it probably
I
will.
appreciate Jake. And the reason I do that is because I'm retired. And this is fair, I'm not looking for a job. I don't want a job. I'll never be appointed by Mr. Shefsky to a board or commission. So it takes a certain commitment to do that. See, I'm not saying I'm making a sacrifice. I'm not. I don't want to do this stuff, but you have to be willing, to sort of stand up. And at some point, I'm going to say this, and I say this to employees. I talk to employees sometimes. At some point, it takes a bit of guts. You just aren't going to be perfectly protected, maybe. You just have to, it's who you are. And there's no substitute for that at the end of the day. But I think you're 100% right about it. The more people are involved, the more eyes on government, the better.
And I'll add that a 2/3 majority on the council of a 5-member council is 4 members. And so, yeah, but Joel, if they all come from the county council district, there's probably going to be some allegiances there, but that, yeah, potentially, but yeah.
Just don't let that stop it from getting off the ground. Because this is how, I don't want to think like a politician, perhaps again, but that's the kind of issue. Like I said, this ball's not going to pose this, but what'll happen is an issue like that will get picked. I'm not saying, Joel, your points are good. An issue like that will get picked, and all of a sudden it's the big issue, and it's carrying the day, and we can't do this. I've seen that 1,000 times, and all of you, if you sat there and watch them. So just keep everything in perspective and be willing sometimes to compromise, because get it started is the important part. That's what they did in Baltimore City. That's what they did in Baltimore County. And yeah, some of us had to sit down and write a few words and get the word out. And Mrs. Johnson, who couldn't be here tonight, took off and bombarded the council. They just backed off and just get it started. Joel, I think your idea, I completely understand what you're saying about the independence, but don't let that torpedo either thing with torpedoes the idea.
I'm hearing.
Yeah, no.
No, it's still time. The bill is still
Great bill.
right.
It's a great start.
Yeah, we
There you go.
can amend it
Yeah.
and salvage it once we got our foot in the door. But yeah, Angie and then Kat.
There's a very legitimate concern been brought up by excessive county executive control. The obvious solution, what occurred to me after I looked at how this was set up, is you're gonna have one member on the advisory board for each county council district, so have the county council member, 1 to 1 of their district, and no more than 2 professional members to be appointed by the county executive. That helps disperse the control. And,
That's not a bad suggestion. And then
I'm surprised at how this did it.
I would guess, without knowing, I'm guessing that like Liz is trying to make some strategic compromises here to make sure that the county executive doesn't veto it. That would be my guess. I don't know that for sure, but
Or maybe she's afraid of her own colleagues. See, I can say anything I want.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I laugh because I think your idea has a lot of merit, man.
Uh-huh.
I do. But from just watching Baltimore County and knowing, I'd be scared. I'm scared to death to give any member of that council any more power than they already have. And that's just a bias now. But it's a bias of about 7 years of watching and hearing and reading, you know, and knowing what goes on. So you might be right. It would just be hard for me to get there because I've seen what the council, they have been the instruments of the builders and developers in Baltimore County. Much more so, I think, than here. The county executives, the former county executive told me when I started to work on these issues, and I said, well, maybe Johnny Oshevsky's going to be different. He said, David, and he said, I go ahead and tilt at those windmills. But Mr. Oshevsky, he isn't going to want to jump into that rat's nest any more than his two predecessors. And the county council wields a lot of power. Well, and he was exactly right. You know, we didn't move the needle that much on most of those development issues. So I just come from another background and where the county council is sort of you know, I'm more afraid of them than I'm of other people. So it's sort of, you have to pick your poison, but the balance might be the idea. You know, the checks and balances, like anything else.
Yes. And yeah, last question from Kat, and then we'll wrap it up. I'm sorry we went long, everybody, but yeah, Kat.
So you brought up capital, and I just want to make sure that it's on your radar. Council Bill number 37, which would reduce, which is a carve out right now, and you're looking at if that had been in effect in 2023, except getting $13 million, was it would cut it by $10,600,000.
But what?
Out of. So this is like an 85% reduction for this. Like they're trying to do it without second to the company. So I would just make sure that you guys are fully aware of that we don't want, I personally don't want any more car balance because the more car balance we have.
Whose bill is that?
That is.
That doesn't.
37.
Okay, I'll look into it. No, but yeah, I mean, that's a good point though. You know, so it's basically, you know, exempting people from APFO requirements, which prevents people from being able to build in overcrowded areas. And who wants to be able to build in overcrowded areas? Developers who don't want to follow regulations. And so stuff like that, bills like that are being introduced on a regular basis because of this moneyed influence. And so that's exactly why we need, you know, an OIG, in my opinion. So I'll leave it on at that, unless there's any last comments, questions.
What can we do to support individually support?
Yes, good question. So there is a public hearing, and we are definitely going to send an email about this. And in fact, we have an email, we have a sign up sheet. If Malik, maybe you could pass it around. If we already don't have your email and you know want to sign up, we're going to send an email with you know the link to sign up to testify next Monday, 7 p.m. at the George Howard Building. That's probably the most important thing is, you know, make it as difficult as possible. We all know, you know, if somebody was, you know, completely free from political retaliation, you know, this bill might be vetoed, and we have to make it or not pass in the first place. So we have to make it as hard as possible for our elected officials to not vote for this or to veto it. And so as many people as possible at that public hearing, it may get tabled at the end of the month, and then the county council is on recess in August, and so they may not vote on this thing until like September. So all that to say, this panel is just the beginning of what may be a long or medium term, you know, drive to keep the momentum and attention on this bill. And thank you, David. Thank you, Liz, for both being a part of that tonight. And so next week.
Take numbers count, numbers of people at the hearing,
Yeah.
numbers of emails,
Yeah.
numbers of letter.
Yes.
They don't have to be good, numbers count.
Yes.
You know, that's just the way it works.
Yeah.
So
What is the deadline to sign up?
You can sign up until the meeting starts. I wouldn't recommend doing that because then you won't testify till like 10 p.m. Yeah, it'll be late night for you. But yeah, I'd recommend doing it sooner rather than later though.
Not a week before.
No. You can do it up until the moment of. But yes, thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Need some help.
Yeah.
Yeah.